our first panel of the evening. I'm going to be joined by three people. We're going to be discussing the evolution of crowdfunding. For those of you who are familiar with crowdfunding, who've ever backed a project on Kickstarter or anything like that, you have some idea of how it works. Sometimes you invest in something and it gets launched and it's a great product, and sometimes 2 years go by and you don't see it. That's the way crowdfunding traditionally works. We have a few guests who are going to talk a little bit about how crowdfunding is evolving, and I'd like to introduce them and bring them up. The first person I want to introduce was Josh Liftin, the CEO and co-founder of CrowdSupply. And CrowdSupply is doing something very different in the world of crowdfunding, and I'll let Josh talk a little bit about it. But essentially, unlike other crowdfunding channels where you're backing something that may or may not come to market, CrowdSupply actually vets things in advance, takes a look at them, makes sure that they're viable products, and handles fulfillment. So it's sort of a hybrid between traditional crowdfunding and e-commerce, where you actually are buying a product and not necessarily backing a concept. And they are doing a lot of this now with new brands and new products. And we also have one of the products that they've launched. We have Todd Weaver, the CEO and co-founder of Purism. Purism is an open source laptop designed from the ground up to focus on security and privacy. And I'll let Todd talk about it a little more because he knows a lot more about it than I do. But if you've ever had concerns about there being backdoors on your laptop, about not knowing what software is on there or what the manufacturers put on, Todd's working to stop that. His laptops are built really for your peace of mind and for you to know that when you're buying one of his laptops, everything that's on there you know about, and you control what software is on there, and it's all open source. And our third panelist is Ross Rubin. He is a longtime product researcher and the founder, publisher, and editor of BackerJack, a site that chronicles and follows the crowdfunding business. So if you could all please join me on the stage, Josh, Ross, and Todd, and we will start the session. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to start with a presentation about Purism. I think everyone is a little curious about how this works, and then we will go into the rest of the panel talking about the future of crowdfunding. So.
Hello, I'm Todd Weaver, founder and CEO of Purism. And I was just going to give you a brief introduction, basically on crowdfunding privacy and how it specifically relates to this panel. So, first of all, do we have a clicker for this guy? Excellent. So I wanted to say, first of all, what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and then how it relates to crowdfunding. So really what we do is we make privacy-respecting hardware devices. We're starting with a Librem 13 and a Librem 15. So it's a 13-inch laptop and a 15-inch laptop that fully respects your privacy the moment you boot it up. The next thing of how we do it is we source component parts. We actually source the hardware, manufacture the hardware, and load our own operating system. And then we run software that doesn't share any of your data and it never phones home. The question of why we do it is because there isn't any manufacturer out there today that respects your rights. So if you compare us to anybody else, you're going to see that there's backdoors from the hardware through the software and all the operating system and even the data connection, wireless cards. So we ended up manufacturing and sourcing individual chips, as you can see from that chart. One of the reasons that we actually started Purism is because the thought of 20 years in the future, what computers are going to actually be like. So today, you have laptops and phones and everything's external. And then we're going to pass through a time of wearables, and then we're going to pass a time through attachables, and then we're going to finally make it to a time of embeddable devices. Embeddable devices are going to be where you're actually communicating to and from your brain. And the way you can easily think about that is, right now your eyes are seeing what's on the screen, but it's actually just electrical signals that's communicating to your brain. So in 20 years' time, when you're getting a brain embeddable, would you want that to come from Apple, where you have to register with an Apple ID and everything is tracked, or Google, where they're going to insert ads directly in your brain, or do you want to get something provided from a company where all the source code's available and you're in control of your own brain? Well, if you rewind that back to today, that's exactly what's happening when you're buying hardware devices. So we're starting with a laptop, moving through a tablet, and then a phone. So the real question is, how in the world can we beat big data's products when it's really convenient for you to go buy a laptop or a phone that strips your privacy? Well, the entire thing comes down to convenience. So what we end up doing is we make it where you buy our product and it is by the default installed with all the privacy respecting software that's been verified by third parties and independent developers. So that way you know that you can just buy it off the shelf and it will work for you. Traditionally, you've always had to go you'd buy hardware, and to respect your privacy, you'd have to go download your own software and install it and figure out if that's the best thing, and it's very time consuming. So our whole goal is to make it more convenient to be privacy respecting than it is to strip your privacy. So the brief story. The first thing that we did is we built a prototype. The next thing that we did is we went out to go seek funding. Part of the problem with funding is, when we're talking about privacy, is that we didn't want to go the traditional equity route of getting funding, because then we would be, by definition, at the whim of those shareholders, and they would most likely want to be inserting ads or doing something else that can end up stripping your privacy. So the question is really, how do we go about that? And we also needed to raise enough money to actually manufacture the product and then bring it to light. So what we sought after was, wouldn't it be a great thing if we can end up bringing out to the market and see if they're interested, if users were interested in the hardware, and actually fund the manufacturing process without giving up equity in the business, because they're actually pre-ordering the product, right? So that's, of course, where we met Crowd Supply. So Crowd Supply is awesome for a number of reasons. The first is that it's not just crowdfunding, but it's also a store. So that means that they verify that you have a product first before it launches, and then so you bring a product, or in our case, a prototype, and then we can get feedback from all the backers to saying, hey, what they actually want in the product, so we can modify our manufacturing process. And then after the campaign ends, it's actually the store in which you can go purchase that product, or one of the resellers. So then what we ended up doing is we took that and we went and realized that today there's a supply and demand about fabrication. So 10 years ago we wouldn't have been able to do it, because there was a demand for the resources of fabrication where we would have had to pay $50 million for 50,000 units. But if you go to China today, they've ended up exploding their fabrication so that you can go there and you have empty lines of assembly. So that means that now we're in a position of negotiation. So I can actually negotiate with manufacturing to do a very small run. And that communication basically went something like, it's going to be $5 million to manufacture your laptop. And I said, well, let's move it to units. How many units? And they said, can we do 1,000 units? And they said, yeah, okay, well, that's going to be like $1 million. So $1 million how about we do $500,000? And they say, yeah, sure, we'll do $500,000. And I say, okay, well, that's only 500 units. So can I do 250 units? And they say, yeah, we need that. So we can actually do 250 unit runs at manufacturing scale out of China for motherboards. So that ended up allowing us to actually launch a campaign. So what we did is we negotiated for the $250,000 minimum. We launched our campaign on Crowd Supply, and then we raised $800,000 total across those two campaigns. And then actually one of the things that's important about crowdfunding is you actually have to deliver. So today is the first day that we're shipping the Librem 13 units to the first set of backers, and you'll be able to go see those at the booth right on the other side over here in the corner. So the next question is, what's next? And of course, it's changed the world. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll hold questions till the end of the panel, so I'm sure some of you might have questions specifically for Todd about purism, but I do want to sort of go through the whole panel and then give you guys a chance at the end. So you explained a little bit about sort of why you chose to go with crowd supply, and you know what make them unique. But you know, Josh, maybe you could sort of say in your own words sort of why you started crowd supply and what in your eyes, what's the problem that you're solving in the crowdfunding universe?
So we started Crowd Supply as a reaction to seeing all these crowdfunding projects raise the money but then not deliver on their promises. And as the co-founders, all being engineers and product developers ourselves, we wanted a platform that we could use that would help us deliver, that would help us fulfill our promises. And that's really the genesis of Crowd Supply. You know, Todd mentioned that we're a store, and that's foundational for us, right? We are here to sell things to people. And those things, we want them to be very high quality. We want them to be innovative and new, but it is still a commerce transaction. I think that's an important part of the creative process and not an antithesis to it.
So do you turn down a lot of products because you just look at it and say, there's no way you guys are ever going to be able to manufacture this?
Yeah, we reject most of the projects that come our way. Some of them are just physically aren't possible, like perpetual motion machines or voodoo medicine that just won't work. Some of them are legitimately good ideas, but the execution is lacking, right? They can't actually pull off what they're promising. And then some of them are just bad ideas that they can execute, but shouldn't be executed on. So it runs the gamut.
All those people that you denied feel really bad right now.
Well, they should feel good actually because I gave them good advice, right?
Exactly.
And they didn't waste a year and a half of their lives and mortgage their house to find out that nobody wanted their thing. So, you know, we never say no to anyone outright. We always say no, and here's why, and here's what you can do, and here's some pointers on maybe how you can do it. So.
That makes a lot of sense. And Ross, I mean, you're a longtime observer of crowdfunding. You know, you've watched sort of products fail. You know, do you see sort of this as, you know, either the wave of the future or something that sort of is really needed in the crowdfunding universe, or you know, where it fits into that whole ecosystem?
Well, Josh spoke a bit about the value that it brings to the project creators, but I also think there's value to the consumer. You know, the major crowdfunding platforms today, their major responsibility is to the crowdfunder, you know, the project owners, not necessarily to the backers giving money to the project. So, and depending on the crowdfunding platform, there are some differences. So Indiegogo, for example, is a completely open platform. You know, they value that openness, but that really allows a lot of subpar stuff onto the platform. The Kickstarter is a little more curated, but it's not like they've got a team of engineers and, you know, their calling in life is creative projects, and they support a lot of creative projects, which is great. But of course, building devices is a mixture of art and science. So to the extent that there is some expertise, some guidance in getting the product to market, as a consumer who's choosing to back one of these things because you want early access to it, you know, nothing is guaranteed in life, but I think you can probably feel a lot more comfortable, you know, that it's been vetted.
And to that point, we take great pride in our record, right? So far, 100% of the projects that have received funding from Crowd Supply have delivered. And I'm really glad that the Librem 13 started shipping today. You know, that's a huge milestone for them and for us.
I mean, that's great for crowd supply, but you know, obviously we're in a world where tech companies are supposed to get big fast, and you know, Kickstarter has, you know, thousands of projects, and it sounds like your model for crowd supply by definition means that you're always going to be a little smaller. Is that something that poses a challenge to you in terms of building this into a business, or am I wrong? Or do you see yourselves as being the Amazon of crowd-funded products?
Well, I think you lead by example, right? And so the projects that we pour our heart and souls into are going to set the example for everyone to follow, right? And obviously we can't put as much effort into every project as we do on some of them, But I think that example that's being set is the most important thing, and that those standards need to be held high. And the proof is in the pudding, right? Like we have our average success rate is over twice that of our competitors, as is our average funding rate. So even though we don't have thousands of projects necessarily, they still do much better.
So a couple things that I think are that kind of bolster what Josh is saying is that so when we went through and we were evaluating the different crowdfunding services, so things that really struck me at Crowd Supply that relate to that is that they actually verified the amount you're raising is going to actually be an amount that you can deliver on. So a lot of times what you'll get is you'll get a creator who's amazing at what they're creating, but they're terrible at business or they're terrible at marketing. And so one of the things that Crowd Supply does is it's a pretty simple vetting process. And it's not like everybody has to go meet Josh before they can get on Crowd Supply, right? So it is something that by having the structure in place where you can get vetted on a couple of bullet points, then their projects are of higher quality, and of course then they have a higher success rate from it. So I think to answer your question is the scalability is not because you have to go through Josh to get everything posted, right? It's because you don't, and you can just go through the bullet checkpoint. So it really comes down to the different business model itself within the crowdfunding world.
I think another thing about Crowd Supply that's interesting is that they sell the products after they've been funded. They're a store. And because of that, they have a vested interest in seeing the project succeed as well. And we're starting to see more companies get into the selling part of once these products make it to market, and so therefore they have more of a vested interest. We've seen Indiegogo launch a program called In Demand, which is basically selling projects that have been funded on the site. Got Amazon now with a section called Launchpad. They're not crowdfunding right now, but they're taking projects that have been developed on sites such as Crowd Supply and offering them to the public. And that's also a real challenge for the project owners in many cases. A lot of them, they reach their goal, they get their first few thousand customers, and then the challenge is, well, how do I get to the next stage? How do I get more exposure, more customers? Because there's often a very large investment that has to go into that.
And that's, to your point, we actually make most of our money after the campaign when we sell just from in stock. We'll take inventory ourselves, we'll be a reseller for you, and you can go sell on Amazon or through Starbucks or wherever you want, and can, and we'd be happy for you to do that. But like Ross said, our actual revenue comes after the campaign mostly. Yeah.
Now, you basically handle fulfillment and payments and all of that, and I know you're talking about sort of, that there aren't scaling issues, but does that potentially affect sort of how many projects you can back and your ability to really provide that level of service both to the project creators but also making sure that customers feel like they're getting the same kind of service they would from a traditional e-commerce site?
So fulfillment is easily scalable. That's a known problem. We have a warehouse right now. It wouldn't be that hard to scale up to handle whatever came our way. I think the one piece that is less scalable that we're working on is the marketing side. And right now we partner with some very good PR people, some very good marketers. We do internal marketing ourselves to try to help craft that story and get the story out. But even that, I think, is also scalable, just not in the same way as fulfillment.
Yeah, so one of the things that is different from a lot of the funding sites out there is if you went with Indiegogo or Kickstarter, kind of the two big ones, big names, that what they do is they require you to do all the initial marketing. They'll do none of it until you reach a critical mass. So you're either paying PR, paying marketing, or trying to do it yourself by leveraging your friends and family, and then they will come in after you've already reached the tipping point, and of course, hang their logo on their, dashboard that says they were, you were involved in, and they helped you reach your goal. So I felt like there's some it's not really very genuine in when they say that they market behind a lot of those projects. Whereas crowd supply, so another thing that brought us there is that we knew in working with them that we can actually market from day one, right, and work with their marketing to make sure craft our message and get it out there.
And that's really the dirty secret of crowdfunding, right? It's almost a misnomer. The idea of crowdfunding makes it sound like there's a sea of people out there waiting to buy your product and give you money, when in fact, you're doing the platform a favor, right? You're the one going out and finding your first customers, your advocates, your early adopters and innovators, and bringing them to the platform. And we recognize that, and we want to help do that and pay you back for that.
Ross, I mean, everything that's being said now sort of seems to address sort of some real sort of problems or challenges that the traditional crowdfunding markets have in terms of, you know, both sort of the service they provide to creators and the way sort of, you know, customers, you know, feel that, you know, they can back something and never see it. You know, do you see any other, you know, companies sort of trying to do what Crowd Supply is doing, or trying to find other ways to sort of make crowdfunding more effective for both project creators and consumers?
Well, you know, there are a lot of interesting experiments out there. Etsy, which you probably know, is a site that offers a lot of handmade craft-like products. They launched their own crowdfunding portion of the site. You know, but that's not really for mass-produced items by definition. We've also seen Amazon offer an Etsy-like store on its site. To the point of focus, you know, something you have to keep in mind again is that Indiegogo and Kickstarter have many, many different categories of products on their site. You can fund films there, books, games, art, you know, wonderful public, you know, charity options. You know, Kickstarter now is doing, you know, a campaign for refugees in Europe. Wonderful, you know, it's great. But, you know, because devices are a relatively small part of their business, and you know, also perhaps in part because they view what they're doing as a public trust. You know, it's questionable how much interest they're going to have in this kind of focus. Now, it's an important category to them, and there are a lot of, you know, they have a lot of reach, and there are a lot of cool products that get funded on the site. But from the beginning, they have been very much hands-off, and you know, it's very interesting because we're now starting to see the FTC come in and look at some of these projects. So, you know, if there's enough government scrutiny, you know, they may be forced to pay more attention on that side of the equation.
That makes sense. Yeah, sorry, were you about to say something about this?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that you know, Kickstarter really paved the way in many ways, but it was also the seed for Crowd Supply in the sense that, you know, they came out with this very public blog post entitled "Kickstarter is not a store," and that's what really started Crowd Supply. And our first blog post was "Crowd Supply is a store," and we wanted to be proud of that. We wanted to do that and help people in that way. You know, I consider Kickstarter a great arts patronage platform, and that's completely different than what we do.
So, you know, we have a little time left. I do want to have some questions, but before that, you know, question sort of I'd have, and I think a lot of people probably have, is, let's say you've got what you think is a great idea for a product. You know, what's next? How do you work with Crowd Supply? How do you get that product to market?
You can call us, email us, fill out a web form, and you basically have to fulfill 3 different criteria. Is it a physical thing that's shipped to somebody, that's manufactured and shipped? Do you have a good plan for raising the money you're asking for? And most importantly, do you have a good plan for spending the money that you're asking for if you make it? And if you can satisfy all those things, then great, let's do it. If you can't, then we'll give you feedback and kind of explain why and maybe where you should go.
That's great. I mean, it sounds like a great opportunity for, you know, small businesses that are looking to break through and like Purism, have something that is really unique in the marketplace and want to get it out there.
Yeah, we've worked with people, individuals, to small teams, to companies that have been around for years. So it's for everyone, really.
That's great. Okay, we got a couple of minutes, so I do want to open it to questions. I think we might have every mic in the building on the stage right now. So if anybody has questions, just raise your hand and I will get my mic to you. Do I see any hands? Yeah.
Hi, so my question is for Scott. What operating system are your computers using? Do you store it on your own? Are you using Linux as a base? Are you working on a custom Linux kernel?
Yeah, so we are, it's our own, it's called PureOS, but clearly you are technical, so I'll answer that question. It is Debian-based, so it's actually a Linux kernel that, so it's a GNU Linux operating system, so it's kind of like your Android phone for those non-technical, where it's a Linux kernel and then a bunch of software on top of it. And so what we did is we took Debian, forked it, and then made our own PureOS, and we added a bunch of privacy-respecting features by default. So that means that encryption of your hard drive by default, installing privacy badgers, so we're removing trackers that track you when you're going around on websites. We install Tor browser by default, so you can have anonymity. And then, of course, you have the hundreds of thousands of free software that's available at not only no price, but where the source code's available, so you can, so you know that it's operating in your best interest.
Another question? Yep.
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering, how much ownership do you guys at CrowdSupply take for the customer service aspect of it? Is it something that you help out with, or are the people on their own once they've launched a product?
I think I heard you ask about what our cut is, and specifically around the customer service.
It was also equity, if any equity is taken.
Yeah. So we don't take any equity at all. We don't do equity crowdfunding at all yet.
Is that a yet in there?
Well, we don't have any plans for doing equity crowdfunding. We take a cut of sales through CrowdSupply. So it's a percentage. There's no upfront fees. It's the percentage is based on how much work we're doing. So it can be between 5 and say 15%, but it really depends on what we're doing for it. The customer service and support is free because we want our customers to be as happy as possible, and that means answering their emails and updating their orders and getting them in touch with the creators when they have questions.
Do you handle returns?
Yep. We handle, if we're doing fulfillment, then we handle returns and lost packages and insurance claims and kind of everything that's involved with a fulfillment operation. Yeah.
Another question? Do I see any other hands? Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Based on your experience with crowdfunding, would you say it's sustainable past, I guess, the one-off project-based? As in, would it be sustainable to a sort of, let's say, subscription-based funding process where, let's say, customers or crowd per se would be able to, let's say, fund a company that was generally focused on the interest that person or persons would be interested in funding?
I don't think I caught the entire question. Could you paraphrase it for me? The audio is really bad back there.
I caught some of it, which was, do we think that crowdfunding is sustainable for subscription type offerings? We have seen that model in content. There's a site called Patreon, Patreon, and you have a lot of folks using that platform who are doing blogs and other creative works. And so people who want to support those sites pledge for, that they'll give whatever, a couple of dollars every month. And then
and specifically for each post or each piece of content, they'll get some money. Give some money for it.
No, for the ongoing operations.
But isn't it per piece of, like, I'll give you $10 every time you post a video, or is it every month?
No, it's every month.
okay.
I believe. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe there are variations, but I definitely know they can go every month. And so the rewards will be stuff like, if we get to $5,000 a month, we'll launch a podcast, something like that. Or we'll give you 3 months premium access or an ad-free website or something like that.
Yeah, for the kind of products that we do, we've offered subscriptions before on certain campaigns, but it makes more sense to just have a one-off transaction for most products, I think. And of course, you can offer your next product, and your next product, Todd is offering his second product right now, and so you get feedback from your initial customer base, but it's not formalized in a subscription model necessarily.
We are going to have the next panel up momentarily. If there's one more question, I can take it. Otherwise, okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you guys. This was great. Thank you.